The Gospels, Mark chapter 8. In those days there were again a great crowd. In those days where there were again was a great crowd without anything to eat, he summoned the disciples and said, My heart is moved with pity for the crowd, because they have been with me for 3 days and have nothing to eat. If I send them away hungry to their homes, they'll collapse on the way, and some of them may have come a great distance. His disciples answered him, Where can anyone get enough bread to satisfy them here in this deserted place? Still he asked them, How many loaves do you have? 7, he replied. He ordered the crowd to sit down on the ground. Then taking the 7 loaves, he gave thanks and broke them, and gave them to the disciples to distribute. They distributed them to the crowd. They also had a few fish, and he said the blessings over them, and ordered them distributed also. They ate and were satisfied. They picked up the fragments left over. 7 baskets. There were about 4,000 people. He dismissed them. He got into the boat with his disciples and came to the region of Dalmanutha. The Pharisees came forward and began to argue with him, seeking from him a sign from heaven to test him. He sighed from the depth of the spirit and said, Why does this generation seek a sign? Amen, I say unto you, no sign will be given from this generation. To this generation. Then he left them and got onto the boat again and went off to the other shore. They have forgotten to bring bread. And they have only 1 loaf with them in the boat. He enjoined them, watch and guard against the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod. They concluded amongst themselves that is because they had no bread. And when he became aware of this, he said unto them, Why do you conclude that it is because you have no bread? Do you not yet understand or comprehend? Are your hearts hardened? Do you have eyes and not see, ears and not hear? And do you not remember? When I broke the 5 loaves of the 5,000, how many wicker baskets full of fragments did you pick up? They answered him, 12. And when I broke the 7 loaves for the 4,000, how many baskets of fragments did you pick up? They answered him, 7. Then he said unto them, Do you still not understand? When they arrived at Bethsaida, he brought to them a blind man and begged to touch him. He took the blind man by the hand. When they arrived at Bethsaida, he brought to them a blind man and begged them to touch him. He broke the blind man by his hand and led him outside the village. Putting spittle on his eyes, he laid his hands on him and asked, Do you see anything? He looked up and replied, I see people looking like trees and walking. Then he laid hands on his eyes a second time, and he saw clearly. His sight was restored, and he could see everything distinctly. So he sent him home and said, Do not even go into the village. Now Jesus and his disciples set out for the villages of Caesarea Philippi. Among the way he asked his disciples, Whom do people say that I am? They said in reply, John the Baptist, others Elijah, and still others one of the prophets. Then he asked them, Who do you say that I am? Peter said to him in reply, You are the Messiah. Then he warned them not to tell anyone about him. He began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer greatly and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, the scribes, and be killed, and rise after 3 days. He spoke this openly. Then Peter took him aside again to rebuke him. At this he turned around and looking at his disciples, rebuked Peter and said, Get behind me, Satan. You are not thinking as God does, but as humans do. He summoned the crowd with his disciples and said to him, Whomever wishes to come after me must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake, and that for the gospel, will save it. What profit is there for one to gain the whole world and to forfeit his life? And what could one give in exchange for his life? Whomever is ashamed of me and my works in this faithful and sinful generation, the Son of Man will be ashamed for when he comes in his Father's glory with his holy angels. Who is ashamed of me and my words in this faithless and sinful generation, the Son of Man will be ashamed from when he comes in his Father's glory with the holy angels. Okay, and that is now we're now on chapter 9. And Jesus, of course, is just like of Mark, or Matthew, just a little bit changes in there. Story's pretty much the same. Maybe different lines. Maybe some other gospel leader had noticed a different thing. Noticed a different line or different. Everyone's different. All the four leaders of the gospels were different, so they noticed a different thing. They paid emphasis. Something was more important to them. But it remains the same. It kind of completes the story, the whole story. So we're working up towards the Passover. So chapter 9. Thank you for watching our show. We're gonna be right back.